she was a passionate artist, dedicated to making a positive mark on society. Her ambitious dreams led her from South America to an unexpected life in New York City. She was an actress, a pianist, a painter, and the wife of America's most famous classical musician. But to her friends and family, who knew her most intimately, she was simply Felicia. Felicia Montealegre Bernstein, to use her full name, was born on February 6, 1922, in San Jose, Costa Rica, to a Costa Rican mother, Clemencia Montealegre Cohn, and an American father, Roy Cohn. Roy was a mining engineer working in San Jose. From there, he was transferred to Santiago, Chile, to head the American Smelting and Refining Company. Felicia and her two sisters, Nancy and Madeline, grew up in Santiago in a multilingual household. The girls were educated in a British convent school where the nuns were strict, and Felicia often ran into trouble. She was apparently a frequent visitor to a special closet reserved for solitary punishment. As an adolescent, Felicia had already decided that Santiago, Chile was too tame for her. Because her father was American, she was able to adopt U.S. citizenship at age 21, when she went to the embassy in Santiago and took an oath of allegiance to the United States. 2 years later, she emigrated to the U.S. and lived there for the rest of her life. Felicia arrived in New York City in 1944, ostensibly to study piano with celebrated Chilean pianist Claudio Arrau. However, she had additional plans of her own. She promptly enrolled at the drama workshop of the New School for Social Research under the tutelage of Herbert Berghoff, who would later direct her in several of her theatrical roles. Adopting her mother's maiden name for her new stage name, Felicia Montealegre made her first New York acting appearance in Garcia Lorca's If 5 Years Pass at the Provincetown Playhouse. In 1946, at the age of 24, Felicia made her Broadway debut in Swan Song by Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur.
Felicia Montealegre to Leonard Bernstein, summer 1946. It's nearly 3, but I can't go to sleep. I'm feeling particularly lonely tonight. It's rather dreadful getting home late after the show, opening the door, putting on the light, and being faced with the most acute aloneness. But then, as you once remarked, New York is full of people like me. No consolation at all. I should be very happy, and of course there are moments when I am. This job has been a wonderful stroke of luck for me, and a grand beginning. It's such a satisfaction to be actually working and not just studying and preparing. You know. It's feeling that you belong at last to the something you were striving for.
Beginning in 1949, Felicia starred in leading roles on numerous weekly television anthology dramas, including Kraft Television Theater, the Chevrolet Teletheater, and the Philco Television Playhouse, all on NBC, as well as the CBS network's Studio One, among others. In 1949 alone, she starred in 10 teledramas, including the role of Mildred Rogers in an adaptation of Somerset Maugham's Of Human Bondage, in which she performed alongside actor Charlton Heston. That year, Felicia Montealegre was named Most Promising Female Star by Motion Picture Daily's Television Fame Poll.
You bored me stiff. You've always bored me with your manners and your iron mighty ways. Used to make me sick just to have to kiss you. We were laughing at you, Harry Griffiths and I, because you were such a mug. A mug!
If you've quite finished.
I've finished, all right. Finished with you and your almighty airs. Not good enough for you, eh? You cripple!
Her acting career flourished throughout the 1950s. Felicia's major Broadway roles and frequent appearances at summer festival playhouses included A Doll's House, The Merchant of Venice, Along Came a Spider, Henry V, and Antigone. Felicia was introduced to Leonard Bernstein in 1946 at a party at Claudio Arrau's house. The couple became engaged soon after, but by December of 1947, they had broken it off. Between 1948 and 1951, Felicia was in a serious relationship with actor Richard Hart, with whom she had performed in several plays. Hart suffered from severe alcoholism and died of a coronary occlusion on January 2, 1951, at the age of 35. Felicia had remained friends with the Bernstein family during her separation from Leonard, and soon after Hart's death, her relationship with Leonard resumed. Olga Kusevitsky, wife of conductor Serge Kusevitsky, announced the couple's engagement on August 12, 1951.
What do you do when you're so gifted, you know? You married Leonard Bernstein. If you're lucky or unlucky or whatever the way you want to interpret it. They had to have had good times.
Less than 4 weeks later, on September 9, 1951, the couple was married at Temple Mishkan Tefillah in Boston. In a placatory gesture to her in-laws, Felicia converted to Judaism prior to the wedding. Over the course of the marriage, husband and wife were relatively informal about their religious expression, embracing elements of both Judaism and Christianity.
I think Felicia understood she had married someone different and someone who could not be changed. And she wasn't going to try it. The only thing that she would ever try was, let's say, table manners. Oh, Lenny, don't eat that with your spoon.
Felicia was a devoted supporter of her husband's busy career. In the summer of 1957, as he was feverishly completing the score of West Side Story, Felicia wrote Lenny regularly from her vacation in Chile. As she often did, she used his Bernstein family nickname, Leonard.
August 1st. Don't give up the ship, Leonard. Fight for what you think is right. What you wrote was important and beautiful. I can't bear it if they chuck it out. That is what gave the show its stature, its personality, its poetry, for heaven's sake. From way down here, I protest. Promise me you'll make an effort to get enough sleep. Are you eating correctly? Or just pastrami sandwiches and coffee in cartons? Leonard?
In 1952, Felicia gave birth to her first daughter, Jamie, and returned to her acting career just a month later, appearing in a Kraft television theater production of Divine Drudge. In 1955, she gave birth to her son, Alexander. Another daughter, Nina, followed in 1962. Felicia began performing in classical music concerts in 1957 as the narrator in Lucas Foss's Parable of Death. Her repertoire with orchestra also included Honegger's Joan of Arc at the Stake, Stravinsky's Persephone, and Debussy's The Martyrdom of Saint Sebastian, for which she was praised for her great dramatic power. Her performance of Honegger's Joan of Arc, which featured soprano Leontine Price in the role of Margaret, was hailed in the New York Times for its touching simplicity.
You would have to be cunning indeed to stop those lilacs from blooming, to stop those cherry trees from blooming and filling the whole world with cherry blossoms. As my father says, you'd have to get up pretty early in the morning. But that is just when Catherine and Margaret begin to speak to me.
Felicia's concert performances included several collaborations with her husband. Leonard Bernstein wrote the narration for his 1964 Symphony No. 3 Kaddish with his wife Felicia expressly in mind. In addition to Bernstein, Montealegre worked with such notable conductors as Raphael Kubelik, Lucas Foss, Joseph Krips, and Charles Munch, among many others. Felicia's celebrated graciousness and charm were a keen asset to her husband in his career, most notably on his international tours with the New York Philharmonic. Bernstein and his wife made a particularly positive impact during the Philharmonic's historic 1958 tour of 21 Latin American cities under the auspices of the U.S. Department of State.
Felicia Bernstein to Leonard Bernstein, Santiago, Chile, August 20th, 1957. Anyway, things are better. I spent the day in the country, which I'd been pining to do since I arrived. It was more beautiful even than I remembered. A glorious jewel of a day. Trees blossoming in profusion, lambs grazing, a soft smell of eucalyptus in the air. And for the first time, I wished desperately that you could see it, because that is Chile. The earth, the smells, the snow-covered mountains, the country bread baked in outdoor ovens. All this I will yearn for always.
In 1967, Felicia returned to Broadway, playing the role of Birdie in a Broadway revival of Lillian Hellman's The Little Foxes, directed by Mike Nichols. She made her Metropolitan Opera debut in 1973 as Andromache, a principal non-speaking, non-singing role in Berlioz's Les Troyens. One of her final televised performances was in 1977 in a production of William Walton's Facade for the CBS program Camera 3. Her final Broadway role in 1976 was in Pavel Kohut's Poor Murderer, directed by Herbert Berghoff, who had been her first drama teacher in New York 3 decades earlier. Felicia began painting in the 1960s, at first under the guidance of painter Daniel Schwartz, whom she met once a week for 3 hours to study figure and portrait painting. Schwartz said, "Felicia was very self-deprecating and modest about her work, but very smart. She took instructions well and began to show a talent, a sensitivity, a softness." Felicia subsequently studied with celebrated painter Jane Wilson, who remarked that Felicia had a playful quality in her work. Felicia's kindness and warmth were infectious, as was her razor-sharp wit.
Lenny was so proud of her. But she could also be very imperial and imperious. For instance, when she was she was sitting at the box at Avery Fisher, as it was then called, I think, and in her box was Rudolph Bing and some other people, but Rudolph Bing came late, and then he sat down and he began to introduce everyone in the box to each other, but he left out Felicia. So finally, at the end, he said, I'm so sorry. This is Mrs. Bernstein," upon which she looked at him and said, "Too late."
Felicia was a passionate advocate for social justice throughout the world. As a social activist, Felicia chaired the American Civil Liberties Union's Women's Division, and she was an early supporter of Another Mother for Peace, an anti-war organization. She hosted a controversial fundraiser to support the families of the Black Panther 21 in January 1970. And in 1972, she was arrested on the steps of the Capitol during an anti-war protest in Washington, D.C. During Senator Eugene McCarthy's 1968 presidential campaign, Felicia canvassed across the country with her friends Rose Styron and Phyllis Newman. Felicia also worked for Amnesty International, including behind-the-scenes efforts in Chile during its political turmoil in the 1970s.
When I found out that I was going on my first mission for Amnesty International and taking my daughter Susanna with me, because Pinochet had just gotten President Allende killed, courtesy of the United States, Henry Kissinger mainly, in Chile, Amnesty from London asked if I would please go down to Chile and bring back information on where Allende's ministers were political prisoners and on how the young Americans who were students or visiting there had disappeared. And so Amnesty wanted all the information I could get on the disappeared. When I said I was going there and didn't know what I was doing, Felicia said, look, I was brought up in Chile, and my sister Nancy is married and still lives there. So she said, in order to protect you, I think it would be good if you took this big bolt of material that my sister Nancy wants for curtains with you and Susanna in the plane, and I will have Nancy's husband meet you. So Felicia gave me this huge bolt of curtain fabric, and we took it with us. And Nancy's husband met us in his wonderful little red convertible. He said, well, here's the card of my office. It's a real estate office and a travel office. The travel agency was crucial in getting Susanna and me out safely, at length, I might say. And so then I saw your mom when I came back and gave her a big hug and thanked her for saving us.
Over the course of her life, Felicia maintained a circle of close friendships, many of them with well-known figures, including Mark Blitzstein, Martha Gellhorn, Glenn Gould, Lillian Hellman, Mike Nichols, Stephen Sondheim, Richard Avedon, among many others. She frequently celebrated their careers and championed their social causes, giving generously of both her money and her time. In 1974, Felicia was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a mastectomy. 3 years later, the cancer returned, this time to her lungs. Even in the throes of her illness, she never lost her sense of humor.
When she was so sick in the hospital, and I was sitting next to the bed, I said to her, Felicia, is there anything I can do for you? And she said, yes. Never get another perm. I mean, it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. Nobody else in the world would say that.
Despite numerous medical interventions and procedures, Felicia died of her disease on June 16, 1978. She was 56. Shortly before her death, Felicia returned to the Catholic Church of her youth. She is buried alongside her husband Leonard at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. After Felicia's death, several scholarships and fellowships were established in her memory. Scholarship funds at Columbia University, the Juilliard School, and New York University have benefited students studying acting, playwriting, directing, and producing. At the Tanglewood Music Festival, the Felicia Montealegre Bernstein Fellowship was established in the 1980s as an annual sustaining fellowship for pianists. And HB Studio in New York annually hosts the Felicia Montealegre Masterclass for acting students. In the early 1980s, Leonard established the Felicia Montealegre Bernstein Fund of Amnesty International USA, the first of its kind, in honor of his late wife. The fund has allowed the couple's joint mission to protect human rights to endure past their lifetimes.
Herbert Berghoff to the family of Felicia Montealegre Bernstein, 1978.
She was truly a grown-up child, exasperated about the imperfection of life and art. Shakespeare must have known her when he wrote, "There was a star danced, and under that Felicia was born."